Aran's eyes opened wide. She felt how clumsy and heavy her body had become. She felt strange. Aran looked at her small, soft, chubby hands. She had become a child and was horrified to think she had ended up in hell. She began to hit her chubby hands on the bed, alarmed, but then Aran remembered that she was the daughter of the Namgung clan and a sword demon who lived to avenge her family. Aran looked around and did not notice the guards, so she began to think about how she could escape the unknown room. Namgung gathered all her strength to try to break the curse, but her inner energy had disappeared. The idea that they had deliberately deprived her of her powers and adult body through witchcraft made Aran burst into tears. She screamed indignantly throughout the unknown house because she had spent so much effort studying her power. An unknown woman took her in her arms and immediately asked sympathetically with a smile what was wrong with her baby. This woman turned out to be Namgung's nanny. Aran was completely confused and outraged. She had really returned to childhood. With tears in her eyes, Namgung began to remember many memories that had faded over time, but one remained firmly engraved in her memory. It was at the dinner to celebrate Jairan's 5th birthday that it was discovered she could not learn martial arts. Jairan could not match her brothers and sister, neither in intelligence nor in martial arts, so she heard over and over that she was a disgrace to the family. Many nights Heron studied books in secret, but in the family Namgung there was no place for mediocrity, and the youngest daughter was ignored. Only a faithful nanny was always willing to lend her shoulder and provide support. No matter what they whispered behind her back, the nanny was always there and comforted Heron. But when Heron was 8 years old, the nanny died and Namgung lost her support and a piece of her heart. Heron recognized the nanny and broke down crying, and the nanny smiled softly in response. The nanny asked the maid to prepare a bath for the baby, while Heron thought about how strange the magic was that could make time go backward. She thought sadly that everything happening now was just a hallucination. A few days later, nothing had changed. The baby remained in bed all day. As planned, they carried her in their arms, washed her and dressed her. One day, Aran woke up to the sound of a rattle. Thoughts of failed revenge filled her head. The maid took Heron in her arms and took her to be changed. Heron looked around and recognized her room, expensive fabrics, rich decorations. Aran was surprised to think she had been raised in such luxury. Aran sadly remembered that she grew up in wealth and love until her family discovered she was an ordinary girl. But Aran decided to enjoy her new life. The maid returned to the room and took Aran in her arms to take her back to the room. Haran decided to make the most of her new life with only 5 years left until the turning point. Haran began to like her new life. She thought it was cute to be a girl. From the moment of the Namgung family's death until her own death, Haran could not sleep peacefully, but now she felt cared for and could allow herself to relax and not think about her debt. The maid laid Haran down and began to lament the cruelty of the young lords and ladies of the house who did not visit the baby. The maid recalled that during the clan's funeral and Jairan's illness, none of them had visited the baby. She lamented with frustration while Haram thought about how quickly she had gotten used to that kind of treatment. Jairam thought nostalgically that only during this period was she considered part of the Namgung family and got lost in memories. Aran turned around at the loud knock on the door and the shouts directed at her. 2 women appeared at the door saying that Aran was accused of trying to poison the daughter of the Iron Blood Alliance leader and must be punished. The heavily armed warriors forcibly tied Aran up, who could not defend herself. Aran was accused of a crime she did not commit. That day her small and peaceful world shattered. 2 warriors dragged Aran tied by the arms, and the whispers of the lords were heard everywhere. The warriors pushed Haran until she was on her knees, and she stood before the elder of the clan, Master Lee of the Namgung clan, the property administrator, who said that Jairan had to submit to the demands of the leader of the Iron Blood Alliance. Jairan was outraged because she was not the one who poisoned the daughter of the leader of the Iron Blood Alliance. One of the alliance's ambassadors pointed a sword at Haran and shouted that the daughter of the leader of his clan drank the tea that Haran brought and was poisoned. The elder laughed thoughtfully and asked the ambassador to calm down since the decision had already been made, and the evidence against Haran had been confirmed. The elder of the Namgung clan confirmed that he would hand over the criminal Jairan to the alliance. Despite her excuses, the warriors of the Iron Blood Alliance openly laughed in Jairan's face. While the people of the Namgung clan whispered behind her back when she tried to justify herself, no one listened, and conclusions were drawn. Jairan shouted that she would never do anything that could overshadow the Namgung clan because she was also part of the clan and the family. The head of the Namgung family, Namgung Choi, Jairan's older brother, entered the hall. Aran thought sadly that he was not on her side because without the leader's consent, the warriors would not have dared to enter the main palace and take Aran. The men told Choi that they would hand over Jairan to the alliance, but he only asked if that was truly the alliance's wish. The ambassador proudly responded that the Iron Blood Alliance and the Namgung family were allies and that handing over Heron was a true act of generosity. Choi Namgung sent the alliance warriors back and said that the Namgung clan would not hand over its descendants to anyone. Haran looked at her brother, surprised, not understanding why he was taking her side when he could have denied it or pretended nothing had happened. Choi simply replied that Heron was part of the family he had sworn to protect Haran. She could not believe him and shouted at him to hand her over to the alliance and not cause problems for the family that protected the clan. She thought the clan would have lived in peace and quiet if she had not been born. There would have been no tragedy in the Namgung family. But Choi thought differently and told Heron that she was part of the family, so he would not hand her over to the people of the alliance. He said that Jairan had been part of the family since birth and that the Namgung clan would not abandon her. Choi sent Heron back with Kanggu and added that he and Shanggu would catch up. Shanggu carefully took a hairpin from her hair and gave it to Heron. That day, Heron recovered everything she had lost and realized that for Choi and Shanggu, she was more precious than their lives. Heron learned that Unchen had developed several strategies for her, asking her to find Wani from the Golden Scale Trading Company and let her know that time was up. Heron realized how much Kanggu appreciated and protected her until his last breath. That day, Aran found everything she had longed for and lost it all, and then vowed to avenge her lost family. So many years under the same roof, and all she knew about her brothers and sister was how dear the clan was to them. She wondered why between her and the clan they chose Heron. She could never discover the answer because she was the only one who survived from the entire clan. The little one's eyes opened and a soft blue light surrounded her as she extended her small chubby hand in front of her 15-year-old brother. Namgung Choi, arms crossed, gently placed the palm of his hand on the baby's forehead and nodded with satisfaction. The temperature had dropped. Choi said he was surprised the last time Heron smiled so brightly despite the intense heat. His words made Aran think and realize the reality of what was happening. She remembered what had happened a few days earlier. A soft hand touched Namgung's hot forehead, recalling the touch of a nanny. Haran opened her eyes with a smile and made a sound of satisfaction, hoping to see her beloved nanny, but saw the surprised face of her brother Namgung. Choi, in response to the frightened murmurs of the girl, Choi smiled cheerfully. The great sword of the Namgung clan, Namgung Choi, was a genius destined to rise above the clan after the bloody war with the blood cult. He was the embodiment of moderation and calm. His thoughts were impossible to read when Heron was sick and refused to eat when she dressed in her best clothes to please him. Choi remained as cold as ice. Heron thought that making her older brother smile was a chimera and considered the memories of her love were just a dream while little Heron was sick. Kanggu secretly visited her following her older brother, and the next day the caring Soren appeared. The care and love of the brothers and sisters were not a dream nor inspired by fever. They really came to visit the sick Heron in the memories of Jeran Namgung Soren. He often heard humiliations directed at his younger sister, but always proudly overlooked them. Kambu also heard the harassment and was present during it, but did nothing to stop it. Little Jeran shuddered, thinking that her indifference might have been part of a test and a way to cultivate a strong spirit within her. Meanwhile, Choi took a golden rattle with bright red rubies from his sleeve and gave the gift to little Jeran. Choi shook the rattle with a serious expression, and the curious girl watched his movements with delight. Despite her joy, Heron could not trust her brothers and sister. She still considered herself a disgrace and a stain on the clan, and could not believe in their love. Choi interrupted Jeran's serious thoughts with a laugh and gently tapped her soft, chubby cheek. He watched her attempts to pout with a smile and carefully spun a beautiful golden rattle. 5 years later, the situation could change. Jeran remembered the humiliation and coldness of her family, so she decided to trust her brother. Little Jeran proudly extended her hand to her brother and asked him to give her the golden rattle, but Choi, with a sweet smile, put the toy away in the red chest so the girl wouldn't hurt herself. With a loud scream, Aran burst into tears in front of her brother, panic-stricken. Choi approached his crying sister, not knowing how to calm her. Jeran stared at him, unwilling to give up so easily. Then Choi took the girl to her lessons, and his calm, warm and majestic aura instantly calmed Jeran, and she fell asleep. Choi remembered the first time he saw his little sister in their mother's arms and could hold her. She always fell asleep quickly in his arms. The next day the maid cared for Heron with a smile and praised her for her childish mischief, calling her cute. It was then that Heron first thought, looking at her baby face in the mirror, that she could be considered beautiful. A random thought made Heron remember that in high society she had another nickname, the thorny flower Namgung. Rumors circulated that insolent men captivated by Namgung's appearance felt hurt by her cutting words and cold attitude. While Heron remembered her past, the nanny commented on how the second night had fainted, causing an uproar throughout the estate. He was bedridden, and no one in the house cared about his condition, nor that of his lover. The maid enthusiastically listed all the gossip of the estate, and mentioned the employment of her dear nanny Haran, which piqued the boy's curiosity. The nanny appeared at the threshold, with a serious frowning face, and scolded the maid for her negligence. Haran could not bear to see the maid upset, so she decided to cheer up the sad nanny. The girl tangled herself in the long sleeves of her clothes and began to dance with a wide smile. The nanny took Heron in her arms with a gentle smile and hugged her. Heron snuggled closer to her nanny and inhaled the familiar scent of orchids, which made her eyelids grow heavy and fall into a pleasant sleep. A man's voice woke her from her sleep, persistently scolding the nanny. Heron recognized him as Elderly, the man who would give her to the Iron Blood Alliance in the future. She remembered the leader and the Namgung brothers, their strengths and hidden talents that were revealed over time. Elder Lee said that the previous family head brought the Namgung brothers and sisters off the street, and they looked like dirty vagabonds. In a year, each of them had taken a worthy place in the clan, and had gained universal recognition by revealing their talent. According to the elder, little Heron had hidden potential, so he urged the nanny to make the girl trust her. The scent of orchids made little Heron wonder if the nanny always smelled like flowers just like Elder Lee, and made a connection. One day the nanny yelled at the maid for giving Jairan regular food. young Jiren couldn't stand the yelling, and confessed to her nanny that she herself had asked the maid to give her some regular food. The nanny leaned over Aran and cupped her face, asking the little girl to trust only her. Aran wanted to oppose and defend the maid, but the nanny remained firm. The nanny watched the food Aran ate, the clothes she wore, and her social circle. And Aran perceived her gestures as care, but the more Aran followed her nanny's advice, the lonelier she felt. Remembering her past, Aran couldn't help but think about how much her nanny loved her and was sincere with her. Little Jiren couldn't believe that not even her nanny, the only person who cared for her, loved her. The thoughts of little Jiren were interrupted by a frightened Sorin who suddenly appeared at the threshold of her younger sister's room. Choi Namgung Sorin's twin sister, was always by the young master's side and ensured the family's stability from within. Throughout the Murim Plain, she was spoken of as a talented lady of the Namgung clan, a model of elegance like a lotus. Seeing her scared was unusual for Hiran. Sorin, excited, took the baby in her arms and took her temperature. A warm look and a gentle touch on her back helped Karen to calm down and snuggle closer to her sister's body. Aran sadly thought that maybe she was too old to remember how lovingly her brothers and sister had treated her. Maybe she had forgotten everything due to the shock. The family's current kindness only confused Aran and her feelings even more, and she couldn't distinguish truth from lies. Aran already knew what her family's fate would be, so she broke down crying in her sister's arms due to the strong emotion. Aran wasn't looking for money or riches. She wanted simple human warmth and couldn't fully enjoy it now. Being in the body of a girl, she knew that fate would inexorably separate her from the family she had reunited with. Hearing her younger sister's cries, Sorin couldn't hold back her own tears. She confessed to Aran that she had been studying a mountain of documents for days and nights to be able to free herself as soon as possible and see her little sister. Sorin cried, not knowing how to calm the baby, and Aran looked at her and couldn't believe she was seeing her sister like that. The sister didn't cry when the fire devoured the family estate. She didn't cry when the family was attacked. Sorin kept smiling while she and Choi stayed behind, holding back the attackers until the end at the cost of their own lives. To Aran's surprise, the steadfast Sorin complained to her about her brothers, her relatives from secondary branches, about the merchants who didn't take her into account because of her age. Sorin was dissatisfied with the clan's situation and angry at her own helplessness holding the frightened Aran in her arms. According to Sorin, under the previous heading, the relatives didn't dare open their mouths, but now they considered her and Choi easy prey. They wasted the family fortune piece by piece and enjoyed wealth that wasn't theirs. Thus the unbreakable Sorin presented herself to her younger sister as a young woman tired of the burden of her family's responsibility. Everything she did now was new to her, whether managing family affairs or caring for young Aran. She was only 15 years old. Aran couldn't bear to see her sister cry and smiled widely to cheer her up. Sorin's expression immediately changed and she hugged the baby tighter. Her smile blossomed. Sorin always knew how to find common ground with people, but when her relatives asked her about marriage, she swore to remain loyal to the clan and not to marry. Aran thought that even then it was clear her sister had a lively and rebellious character. Aran never knew why her family decided to side with her at the last moment, but she was determined not to let the family fall. She was no longer a thorny flower capable of defending herself only with sharp words. She is the cruel demon Namgung Aran and does not give up easily on the morning of the new day. The maid tried to feed the dissatisfied Aran, but it was in vain. Not even the strict nanny could influence the girl. The maid was worried about Jiren's health, but the nanny was inflexible and asked not to force the baby to eat if she didn't want to. Little Jiren didn't need food. The Choi twins and Sorin carefully brought food to their rooms. Every night, the baby refused to eat in the mornings, partly because of the nanny. She began to suspect there were selfish motives in her care. The maid took the baby in her arms and began to tell Aran the latest news from the estate. The meeting of the 5 great families was scheduled for next month, so the young head was very busy at that moment. These were the 5 great clans Tang, Pingsigel Mocha, and Namgun. Every year, the 5 Murim clans met to determine the current state of affairs and demonstrate a model of harmony and interrelation among the clans. In reality, this was an eternal clarification of the leadership of the Garen clan. They were preparing to cause a stir at the meeting and take revenge on the enemies who did not come to help their family. Charan wanted to expose the nanny. She cried without stopping for 4 days in her arms, and the family began to worry. The blame for the baby's illness fell on the nanny. The intuition of a direct descendant of Namgung told Hiran that the nanny was not on her side. The nanny was a subject of the Namgung family, so she was responsible for the baby's condition before the clan. If the baby's condition worsened, the nanny would be the first to be blamed and the clan members would suspect something was wrong. The nanny was too busy keeping her secrets to call the doctor, which upset Karen and made her doubt her nanny even more. The girl decided that the meeting of the 5 clans was the perfect time to expose the nanny. Without the nanny knowing, the maid called the doctor. Worried about Jaren's condition, the maid was truly concerned about Hiran and said the baby needed someone who could take care of her. Neither the head of the family nor Hiran's relatives, nor even the nannies according to the maid, could provide the necessary care. The maid spent a lot of time with the baby, telling her about her brothers and sisters, believing that one day Hiran would have reliable support. She admitted she was willing to give her life for Hiran. The next day, the nanny was interrupted by the appearance of a man. He was the doctor of the Namgung family, Nogag. From the door, He asked the nanny why she was not worried about the baby's illness and lack of appetite. The doctor leaned over Namgung, who was sleeping, amazed by her serene appearance. The baby's eyes suddenly opened and she began to scream. Her screams echoed throughout the clan's property and disturbed the healer, the nanny, and the maid who were leaning over her. The doctor touched the baby's hand and said the girl's energy was depleted. She had been screaming and enduring discomfort for so long. The nanny remained firm and said the baby cried more when she saw strangers. The doctor reproached the nanny for her poor response, and she burst out in indignation. The doctor paid no attention to the nanny's words, took the baby in his arms, and took her out of the room. The nanny tried to stop the doctor, but he pushed her aside and told her he would report the baby's condition to the head of the clan. The nanny could not contain herself and called the baby a little demon in front of the doctor, implying that the elder would be displeased. The doctor was not surprised by the nanny's outburst. He suspected she was in complicity with the elder, so he quietly took little Haran out of the room. The nanny went to see the head of the clan to blame the court doctor for Haran's illness. The nanny fell to her knees before the head and begged for pity. She claimed she was the only one on the estate who cared for the baby. The young lord did not believe the nanny and accused her of indifference. The nanny could not believe that the young woman from the Namgung family, rejected by all, would become an obstacle. Winning his favor and love turned out to be very difficult. The nanny tried to dissuade the head of the clan, but without success. He expelled her. The nanny accused the clan leader of indifference toward his own sister, recalling that he was not there when she lost her father and suffered from fever, but the head remained firm and found the nanny guilty of causing harm to a member of the Namgung family. The guards grabbed the nanny and took her out of the hall. Aram thought happily that now she was free from the nanny's influence. Choi turned around worried while Jiran fell asleep. The doctor handed the baby to Choi and told him that now his older brother should take care of her. Choi remembered the important words of Achan. Jiran was the family's weak point, so it was decided not to show the slightest affection towards her from then on. Choi distanced himself from his sister and there was no turning back. Choi knew Achan would be angry with him, but he couldn't stay away from the baby and drew her closer to him. With a smile blossoming on his face, an unknown person appeared in the sleeping baby's bedroom. The feeling of another person's presence disturbed the sleeping Jiran. The baby woke up with a loud cry and turned over. The stranger's face seemed vaguely familiar. It was Achan, with blood running from his lips, telling the Haran adult to run from the house and save herself. Namgung Wonchon had always been in poor health, but recently his cough had worsened and he almost fainted in front of little Haran. Aran was hysterical. She wanted to help her brother, but her weak child's body was powerless. The baby managed to turn over in the crib by herself and almost fell, but Achan caught her and held her. Achan placed the baby on the bed and she grabbed his bloody finger with a smile. Achan took out a handkerchief and carefully cleaned Jiran's palms. The girl's actions seemed careless to him, but he was loving and devoted to his little sister. Neither Achan nor the others wished any harm to Jiran. But the little girl was waiting for the moment they would be disappointed in her when the baby fell asleep. Choi Namgung looked toward the bedroom. Achan told his brother that the baby was healthy, and the doctor's predictions had proven correct. Achan left the bedroom, saying he would show the family a worthy example of what it means to care for the baby. The baby regained her appetite, and the maid was glad that Jiran had recovered the maid. Soso was worried about Jiran because she was under the nanny's supervision, but all the servants confirmed that Soso was on the baby's side and that she was going to call a doctor. Now the nanny shares the latest rumors of the Namgung clan with Hairan. Soso reported that the second young master, Hunchun, was coughing up blood again but was already recovering and preparing to visit the baby. And the young lady Soren severely scolded one of the managers yesterday. Kambu had an unbearable temper and scolded his servants for every little thing. The girl sadly thought that Kambu's arrival would only worsen her headache. Soso also reported that the nanny had already been punished. The elder Shang and elder O discussed how they should proceed now to destroy the clan. Together with the courtier, they decided to increase the dose of medicine for Achan to worsen his illness. The plan had to be completed before the young lord with his sharp intuition could discover everything. Achan was preparing to take a new dose of medicine. Little Haran lay in her bed bored, but Choi and Soren had not visited her for a long time. And Namgung Wonchon approached the baby and watched her from the corner. He did not pick up the baby. He did not feed her like his older brother and sister. He watched her silently and left after another coughing fit. Achan dropped his spoon. Namgung noticed that his silver spoon had darkened. The girl reached out her hand, trying to stop Achan. She knew that silverware changed color when it came into contact with poison. Namgung Unchun was in poor health and therefore could not learn martial arts, but thanks to his outstanding intellect, he was considered a brilliant strategist of the clan. He clearly knew they were trying to poison him but did nothing. This meant there was a force behind the poisoning that could not be underestimated. Aran began to think about what she should do to warn her family about the danger. Then the baby went on another hunger strike and her crying did not stop. Soso wanted to call a doctor, but Choi understood what the girl's plan was. He made clear to her who she needed and who she didn't. He realized she needed a certain person and asked to call Achan. As soon as Achan appeared, the baby stopped crying and Choi noticed it. Choi asked Achan with a smile to feed the baby, but his brother grumpily refused. The baby cried again upon hearing the response and only calmed down in Achan's arms. Achan could not put the baby in danger. Showing his affection, the elders were worried about him. Achan admitted he took poison on purpose. To give the elders a false sense of security, he urged Choi not to play family games but to focus on preserving his own title. Anchan was afraid that the plan would be revealed, but Choi urged him to calm down. Anchan was terrified and did not want to put his sister in danger. But he denied it in front of his family. Namgung Wonjun was a born genius capable of calculating 1000 moves ahead. But he did not understand his own feelings. Meanwhile, Choi revealed that not long ago, the Tang family of Sichuan went to the province for a clan leaders' meeting and was attacked by assailants. Unknown at the Anhui border, Heron was horrified and could not understand who dared to attack a clan known for its ruthless revenge against those who offended them. Choi suspected the elders, but according to Anchan, they never left any trace. Anchan received a secret document with a plan, detailed to attack the clan, and corrected the operation start date thanks to Anchan. The attack did not happen while the clan was there. Choi was horrified. The plan could have become a complete disaster for the Namgung clan, but Anchan said with a smile that the collapse would have waited for another Namgung family, a family of traitors. Choi hoped for the destruction of the internal enemies so that the clan would be freed and belong to a true family. The elders wanted to use the attack on the Tang clan and the poisoning of Anchan as an excuse to strip Choi of his title. The elders could not touch Anchan due to his fatal illness, so the safest place for his sister was beside him. Anchan was willing to sacrifice his life for his family. He said everything would end after the clan meeting the next day. The maid brought lunch to the girl and Anchan. Namgung could not accept his brother's carelessness. He took the poison too calmly. In his past life, Namgung had suffered from poisons, so he knew the danger they posed. Anchan kept the baby's utensils separate and fed his sister himself. Anchan did not look at his food while eating. Namgung feared that his brother's food might also be poisoned and shouted. The food from the spoon fell on Hanchan's sleeve. Hanchan turned around worried, while Heron bit her sleeve with satisfaction. A small dose of poison was supposed to cause indigestion in Garan and force the family to prevent the reckless brother from taking poison, but a small dose of poison caused a burning sensation and the baby began coughing up blood. Anchan shouted to call the doctor and his older brother took the baby out of the room. The next 2 days after treatment, they had to decide Heron's fate. Anchan asked his older brother if he wanted to continue with his plan or allow Anchan to sacrifice himself for the family. Choi admitted that Anchan's decision to let himself be poisoned to expose the conspiracy was the easiest, but also admitted it was a mistake not to stop his brother from the start. Anchan became furious and admitted he was willing to make any sacrifice to protect his family and that he could take the clan's future into his own hands. Because of the incident with his sister, Choi convened a clan council, including the elders, so that Hanchan could stop taking poison from the start. Choi had no intention of following Hanchan's plan. To prevent him from dying, the weakened Hanchan lost consciousness and collapsed at his older brother's feet. Meanwhile, rumors circulated in the clan estate. The family head burst into the elders' chamber and took them away. The servants suspected they were the ones who poisoned the baby and Lord Anjan. The baby kept waking and falling asleep constantly because of the poison, and one night opened his eyes due to a shadow looming over the bed. It was Anchan who seemed renewed. The baby was able to survive thanks to him. He found an antidote in time. Anchan was moved and began to cry, admitting the baby was very dear to him. Anchan was very scared and afraid something bad would happen to his sister. He had a hunch about what the future held for the clan, and Haran promised him that this time his brother's fears would not come true. The girl cuddled next to her brother and wiped his tears. Before, Haran thought that her own appearance disgusted her brother, but if she was in trouble, he always came to her aid. In her past life, due to a misunderstanding with Zoe Tan Yujon, the head of the Tan clan, wanted to poison Heron, but Achon prevented this from happening. When the family was attacked, he was the first to rush to his sister. Just a small touch from Heron made Achon laugh and calm down. For that, Achon, the son of the leader of the black cult, the touch of Jairan, would mean nothing since he did not consider her part of the family, but now everything was different. Achon loved the baby. Achon promised to take care of anyone who hurt his little sister So-So, was worried about Jaren's health and broke down crying when he saw the baby happy. Ajahn continued watching over his sister and did not allow suspicious people to approach her. There was a clan meeting scheduled for today, and So-So announced with a smile that the girl would have a special guest. It was the young master Choi Namgung who greeted the girl with a warm smile. Since the night the baby was poisoned, Choi had changed a lot and now openly showed his love for his sister. Meanwhile, Achun Namgung entered the hall and introduced his younger sister and older brother. To the stranger, it was the head of the Tang clan from Sichuan Tanhoyan, the king of poisons. He approached Choi and little Hiran with a request to examine them. He checked the chief's pulse and found symptoms of poisoning by the cursed blood poison. The elders were horrified by the news and had doubts, but Tang Hoan remained firm. Choi said that the disturbances were caused by the news of the emergence of a clan that had long been considered harmful and destroyed. The elders were worried. Aaron suspected that the elders were involved in the poisoning. Choi specifically brought an external expert to confirm his suspicions about the culprits. He holds the title of family head, but many in the clan disagree with this, so he can use the influence of the king of poison and independent expert. The elders confirmed that the previous elders had committed a terrible act. The head of the Tang clan from Sichuan admitted that the poisoning was caused by the cursed blood poison. If the elders had acted differently, they would have been considered accomplices. According to the precepts of the Murim alliance, the elders would be executed by special forces, and their desire to please the Namgung clan meant the alliance was not so strong. Achon hugged the baby closer to him when Tan Hoen called her a lovely girl. Tanyong asked if the girl would attend the banquet and Achon coughed demonstratively. The leader thoughtfully dropped that he would be delighted to meet Achon and the girl that night. A subject called the chief and informed him that the young master Yuhong had disappeared. The worried head of the Tang clan warned Choi and went to look for the young master. Achon watched him cautiously holding the baby in his arms. The young Lord Yugyeom was smiling and lively. He found entertainment at the Namgung estate and a new friend. The young Kangwoo Namgung befriended Yugyeom from the Tang clan. Meanwhile, disputes arose among the elders at the estate. Elder Chingan was worried that the abandonment of their families by two elders would become a problem if the Supreme Council found out. Elder Cholyotai admitted that it was not them who used the cursed blood potion to poison Achol. If the Murim alliance intervened, suspicions might not fall on the clan chief but on the elders. Elder Gokchol admitted they were cornered. The elders began to argue who would benefit from replacing the poison. Suspicions fell on the head of the Namgung clan. The elders speculated whether Choi Namgung could have used the deadly poison of a destroyed cult long ago on his own brother to achieve his goal. One of the elders could have been a traitor. The elders decided to use the nanny to find the traitor. Elder Gokchul said the plan to crush the Namgung clan lasted 10 years, and the cursed blood potion interrupted it. Elder Gokchul was the one who destroyed the herb cult. Now the elders had to cover their tracks and prepare for a possible escape. The girl in her brother's arms was outraged by her arrival at the meeting. Charming dances, maidens in beautiful dresses, an abundance of delicious food on the tables, and the curious Lord Jung-hong who never left Achon and the baby in the future. Jung-hong will receive the title of Venomous Dragon, but for now he was a sweet boy who wanted to play with little Jaren. He was talkative and actively tried to attract the girl's attention. Jung-hong had been placing microphones on Namgung, poisoning drinks and arriving late to meetings, and that day he was behaving exactly the same way. Aaron drove him away hoping he would come back with more teasing. John Hun saw Jaren as a lonely person and sympathized with her, so he showed his attention through teasing. He was worried that Aaron would feel disgusted by his sincere sympathy. Heran knew that John Jun was deliberately trying to attract her attention, and that trait irritated her a lot. His behavior reminded Aaron of herself in childhood. She also tried to attract her family's attention in every possible way. Young John Hun could not accept the fact that the little girl did not pay attention to him. He thought she hated him because he was the heir of the Poison clan. Young John Hun brought unwanted sad memories for the little girl. In the past, he had tried with the same desperation to earn his family's love. John Hun, with a cheerful smile, promised to come back and pay attention again to the baby. The leader called Achon. The girl noticed that there were no chiefs of other clans visible nearby due to a strange potion. The meeting started earlier than expected. Unchon began to look for someone to leave his little sister with. Soren appeared with a smile and a warm greeting. Soren volunteered to hold his little sister while Unchon spoke with the clan leader. Soren admitted that he missed his baby. Soren did not beat around the bush and told the little girl why he had not been able to visit her for so long. The clan leader invited Soren to his house. The girl found it strange that the leader called Achon separately without Jairan. Both were poisoned and it made no sense to separate them. The girl became agitated when she and her sister were taken in the other direction. Soren promised to protect his baby. Both sister and brother knew of the danger but exposed themselves to it knowingly. The girl heard that the clan leader needed her. The girl thought they wanted to kill her or even kidnap her and began to wonder why the leader needed her and her sister. Heron burst into tears in her sister's arms to get her attention. The servant was worried about the baby's crying and threatened to calm the child so as not to provoke the leader. The servant drew his sword to attack Soren, but the young stranger stopped his blow. The two fighters unleashed the strength and power of their swords to strike each other. The stranger confidently received the blow, protecting Soren and the baby. He took the sword from the attacking servant's hands. The girl saw a piece of cloth, cut with an emblem flying over her. She caught the piece of cloth in her palm with a joyful smile. Holding the baby in her arms, Soren barely dodged the flying dagger. The stranger urged Soren to flee and promised to stop the servant. Soren, holding the baby, ran. It was a frustrated kidnapping and Soren was a much more valuable hostage, since she was the recognized daughter of the Namgung family, unlike little Heran. Heran was sure that the traitors knew the exact time of the meeting and knew the Namgung estate well. This was the work of someone from the Namgung clan. Soren and Heran managed to escape from the estate. Soren was injured in the shoulder. Behind Soren appeared a servant with a dagger. He took the sisters to an unknown place in the forest. Soren stated that the place was too dusty for the baby, who was already frequently ill. When the man left, Soren began to look around the room. Small hands grabbed the window frame. It was young Jung-hoon. He looked at the room with interest and concern and exclaimed joyfully when he saw that the baby was safe. Namgung Kanggu appeared behind him. Soren exclaimed indignantly when she saw her brother and the young master. Kambu ignored his sister's concerns, and a fight was brewing between them. The servant grabbed Jung-hong and Kangwoo by the nape and threw them toward Soren and Heron. He ordered the windows to be sealed so the prisoners could not escape. John-hun immediately asked the baby if she was okay. Soren shared that they were caught by bad people and that she would definitely protect her little sister. John-kun promised that he would also protect the baby. Meanwhile, Kambu was already preparing a plan for revenge against his attackers. He was an expert in punishment and didn't want to let the offenders go so easily. Kambu was not going to stay still, and he was getting ready to leave. Soren helped Kampu climb onto his shoulders and looked out the window. But instead of going out the window, Kampu began to hit the boards. He could break through the barriers because he had been training and studying martial arts for a long time. Jong-hun looked at Kangoo with admiration and asked if Kangoo had escaped before. Instead of answering, Kangoo crawled between the boards toward freedom. Kangoo decided the baby had to get out first, otherwise the kidnappers would come back and execute everyone. Soren doubted that Kampu could safely deliver his sister to their older brothers. Kampu reasoned it would be easier for his sister to escape when there were no hostages. Soren trusted Kampu and made a cone out of his clothes to trick the criminals. Kangoo with Junior and Jaren in his arms began to wait. Soren heard footsteps and was startled, hugging the bundle of clothes tighter, as if to protect it. The nanny appeared in the doorway. Soren was surprised they had no right to let the nanny out. Without the family council's permission, the nanny confirmed Soren's suspicions about the bribe. Otherwise, she could not have been released from prison. The irritated nanny muttered that in the bloodline system, not everyone has the Namgung surname and is loyal to the leader. They have their own ambitions and goals and want to overthrow the leader and gain power. The nanny planned to feed the baby poison and then give the antidote to manipulate the family. Soren laughed and told the nanny to go to hell. The threat to his sister's life forced Soren to pull himself together and defend his family. The blame for poisoning Namgung Wunchon with the cursed blood potion fell on the Peng clan, and the Peng leader Inhook was outraged. The main ingredient of the cursed blood potion was an extremely rare herb kept in the Peng clan, reasoned the leader of the Seagull clan. The elder Chojotai confirmed that the ingredient was brought through the Seagull clan's trade routes. The leader of the Mo and Hengan clan doubted that the secret recipes of the destroyed herb cult had not been found anywhere. The leader of the Namgung clan held a council without notifying the Murim alliance. Hengan wanted to find out their motives. He couldn't believe the Namgung brothers were so reckless as to face the other clans alone. The Namgung did not notify the Murim alliance because they trusted the centuries-old ties between the great clans and had no intention of turning the heads into enemies. The Namgung family only wanted to find those involved and bring them to justice. They did not want a war between clans. The blame for the poisoning with the potion fell on all the clans. So the Namgung family could be mocked and humiliated if the accusation affected the honor of the families. When Namgung Sogwa decided to take in 5 children whose mothers he didn't even know, everyone thought it was the end of the Namgung clan. But Choi Namgung grew quickly and even under pressure from other clans did not give up and kept his head held high. The Namgung clan had no intention of making the poisoning incident public. Choi proposed that the families responsible for the incident pay compensation and resolve the conflict peacefully. Meanwhile, Kangwoo fled the forest with the baby, and Yuhyun hid in a building next to the palace to escape their pursuers. The girl anxiously grabbed Kanwa by the neck and pulled him toward her. Kangwoo handed the baby to Jong-hun and told him to hide while distracting the pursuers. The girl was worried. What was happening reminded her of her last moments with her past family. Kampu was covered in bloody bruises, but he never complained of pain or discomfort. He confidently gave instructions to Jung-hong so he could protect young Jaran. The image of Kangwoo reminded Jaran of her adult self. She asked Jaran to run. Kangwoo shouted that the clan had not taught Jaran fighting techniques. They treated her like trash and that she shouldn't cling to her family and should run away. The pursuers caught up with them and Kangwoo sent Jaran to run. Kambu promised to return and lied. Finally asked Aran to live no matter how hard it was for her now she was younger, and Aran could not let her die recklessly. Kampu touched his sister's hand and said again that he would return. Jong-hun ran to the estate hugging the baby and calming her, said he would return Garen to his older brothers and Kangoo. One of the pursuers noticed Jong-hun and the baby and spat a poisoned silver needle at them. Aran felt she was losing her loved ones again, and that her own death was approaching. John-hun extended his hand and protected the baby from the poisoned needle. He hugged the baby and smiled reassuringly. John-hun called the guards and asked where his grandfather was. He shouted that they were trying to kidnap the baby. The guards were horrified. One of the guards took John-hun and the baby before the head of the Choi clan. The head of the Tang clan was horrified. Just like Choi, they saw their young ones injured. The young Young-hong reported that the baby was about to be kidnapped and locked in a barn with Sorin. The girl tried to warn her older brother her sister was still in danger. She whispered to the girl that they had already sent a shadow squad to look for Sorin. Aran was worried because she could not warn anyone because she still could not speak, could not walk, and could not escape. John-hun said Kangwoo drove away the pursuers, but he and the baby were hit with poisoned needles. Young-hun could protect the baby because he was immune to the poison and caught the poisoned needle. The head of the Tang clan was angry because his grandson had been attacked and hurt the head Tang. Said he would help the Namgung clan carry out a cleanup and find everyone involved in the disaster. Choi concluded the clan meeting and postponed the second one to the next day. Choi sent the Dragon Spear squad to look for Gangu and check the dungeon where the nanny and the elders were. Chun was surprised. Normally his brother was merciful to enemies and did not order them killed when the elders stopped rejecting any method. It no longer made sense to fight them with traditional methods. Choi could not protect his sister that way. Namgung Choi, who valued integrity above all, quickly changed when it came to his sister. Namgung's hope grew that Choi would not abandon her in the future even if she could not learn martial arts. Kanbu and Sorin returned to the property. They were safe, but the maid tried to send young Kanbu to the medical room. The estate fell into the usual chaos from the moment the family reunited. Kanbu broke down crying when he was forbidden To approach his sister and look at her, Kampu was covered in bruises that he did not have when he went to distract his pursuers. Aran decided to pay the debt and gave away the hidden garment with the emblem. The family leaned over the emblem surprised. Thanks to the intense interrogation that Soren conducted on the nanny, the circle of suspects became clear. The Tang clan lent a hand, enraged by the attack on the heir, so the situation was resolved quickly and quietly. But no one in the family could distinguish the emblem. Director Tang passed by the medical building and asked about the baby's health. He himself came to visit his grandson and decided it would be a great idea for Aran and her grandson to reunite. Anchon refused, citing health problems, and the head of the Tang clan commented that he hoped to see them at later great clan meetings. Anchon stopped the leader to ask him a question. The incident that occurred during the meeting affected the Tang clan. The leader could have demanded any compensation, but they asked for nothing. Anchon wanted to know why the head of the Tang clan was so loyal to the Namgung family. The head admitted that his clan owed a lot to the father of the Namgung family, and that he was simply repaying his debt. The clan leader's face had the same sad expression as Junhong's. In the past, with him, it was buried forever. Yunjong had already recovered and was happy to see his grandfather and the baby Hirai. In the past, Hirai did not attend Yujin's funeral, and this time she decided to give the boy a chance. She smiled warmly at him. Yunjong looked at the baby joyfully, said he wanted a little sister like her. Junhong already had one over one Tan Zoe. But he wanted a beauty like Hiran. Upon hearing the young master's words, Anchol said that the clan Namgung does not give his children to anyone, and the head of the Tang clan got angry, defending his grandson and saying he was considered affectionate and adored children. Achun came and handed the baby to young Janjun. Janjun happily sat with little Heron and protected her sleep. Janhun noticed the baby smelled of loneliness just like him. He had a grandfather, an aunt, an uncle, and one over one Zoe, but still felt alone. He admitted he didn't want the baby to experience the same feelings and promised to be there for her. The girl laughed and hugged Janhun. She agreed to see the young master, so he wouldn't feel alone. The young knight refused to go home. The grandfather didn't understand what the problem was. The Namgung family watched in amazement as Janhun became hysterical and repeated that he had promised the girl to protect her. The grandfather grabbed the little rascal, angry at his stubbornness. The young knight admitted he liked the baby very much and wanted to stay with her forever, but the grandfather insisted and ordered the carriage to be prepared. Janhun called the girl and asked her not to forget him, but it was Jaren who didn't want Janhun to forget her. The clan meetings were held every 4 years, and by the next one, Heron would no longer be considered part of the family. Kangoo was outraged because he had not been invited to say goodbye to the young master of the Tang clan. Choi did not let his younger brother say goodbye. To avoid causing chaos again, having gathered the entire Choi family, he announced that the torn emblem belonged to a warrior under the command of the Council of Elders. The Council of Elders was made up of those who had repeatedly demonstrated their loyalty to the Namgung family and had excellent combat training. The Council has access to scroll records of secret martial arts with which they develop and protect the secret techniques of the Namgung clan. Of the 12 elders, 3 turned out to be traitors, but the investigation stalled, so the leader decided to intervene personally, perceiving a threat. Choi said that for the Namgung family, protecting the descendants comes before tradition. The clan's children are the highest priority. Choi and Soren immediately sent Achun to toughen up in combat trials and investigate the traitors while the elders took care of the baby. Choi and Achun agreed to take care of their sister together, but Soren was against it. Soren was busy handling Achun's accounting, and the entire administration was in a state of reorganization. Soren was ready to work and take care of the baby. Achun supported his sister's idea and also volunteered to work and take care of their little sister. The baby always fell asleep quickly in their arms. Soren immediately embarrassed his brother by saying he had been asking the maids how to properly rock the baby. Kampu asked to be given the baby. He had a lot of free time. The elders were not enthusiastic about the idea. Achon suggested giving the baby the right to choose her own nurse. Soren was outraged. It was an unfair decision, because Achon spent a lot of time with Heron. Little children don't do much, so someone who didn't bother her too much would be suitable for the little one. A week later, the baby had to choose who would take care of her. A real war broke out. The family brought toys embroidered with stones and ornaments and sheets of the purest silk, even antidotes that could neutralize any poison. The girl was delighted with the attention. As a result, instead of a competition for the girl's attention, it all turned into a race in which everyone wanted to give their little sister more gifts than the others, and so continued spending time happily with the girl and told her the latest gossip about the estate. The young Kangoo broke several expensive swords, tore silk curtains, and as punishment his allowance was reduced again. It turned out he even had to sell his own things to be able to bring gifts to the baby. That's why after the Namgung family meeting, Choi insisted on a sword fight and then scolded Kangoo for a long time. In the past, Namgung had never been able to see a training fight with the technique of the swords of the unlimited skies. When Namgung saw his brothers, his heart leapt with joy. Namgung Kangwoo's fighting style was sharper and more powerful than his sister's, and Namgung Choi's movements were refined and precise. Aran saw the technique of the sword of the unlimited skies for the first time when Aran turned 5 years old and would be able to learn the same technique. But Aran knew that would never happen. They would never give him a sword nor teach him powerful techniques. Namgung. He wanted to hold a sword in his hands at least one more time. She clasped her chubby and childish hands in frustration. The next morning, Kanba visited the baby with a smile. Kampu shared that he had brought a gift for the girl. It was a damn doll. All torn apart with empty eyes, the girl got scared and then looked closely at the toy. The doll was very well cared for, it was sewn, smelled good, and even had a name embroidered Kanbu. He was eagerly waiting for the baby's reaction to the gift. Namgung cuddled up to the toy with a smile and squealed with satisfaction, wanting to make his brother happy. Kangu admitted that this toy was given to him by his mother. The head of the Namgung clan, according to Kangu, the doll was meant to ward off nightmares and protect the baby. Kangu did not have money to buy the girl a better toy, but said the doll was very dear to him, so he gave it to his little sister. Kambu watched with a smile as the girl hugged her favorite toy at night. Choi and Wunchun found a nice photo in the baby's room. Haran and Kangu fell asleep sweetly together. The toy the baby was hugging scared Wunchun. Kanbu appreciated the toy, but now gave it to someone else, which showed his strong affection for his little sister. Choi gently touched the baby's hair and thought that the former head of the Namgung family, Namgung Sogwan, would be pleased to see how much he had grown. It was the greatest misfortune of the cult of the straight path, an exile whose way back was closed. Choi could not forget the day the exile appeared at the threshold of the Namgung clan refuge in the middle of a furious storm. Choi saw many burning like flames. Driven by a goal, only they knew those who disappear after achieving their goal without leaving a trace. Choi believed that Namgung So-wan would end his life exactly like that upon appearing at the threshold. So-wan immediately asked Choi's name. So-wan admitted he had been looking for Choi for a long time, so Wan sought for Choi to return everything that rightfully belonged to him as the future leader. Choi refused to follow the former leader without Soren. Soren's and Choi's mothers died the same day, leaving the children alone and unable to live so long. 1 without the other. Choi's instincts screamed at him not to let this opportunity pass. But he could not leave without Soren. After thinking a little, Sogwan agreed to take care of the two children. The children had to follow Sogwan's legend about the twins and decide which of them would be older. The people of the clan could not believe that Choi and Soren were the children of the former leader, but could not deny the external resemblance between Choi and the former leader in his youth. So Wan trusted that everything would go well. Once the people of the clan saw Choi, Choi could not believe how much he resembled the previous head. Sogwan admitted that people do not talk about his pathetic and greedy father, but about his brother, whom Choi resembles in appearance. Sogwan's brother was Choi's father, and he was the one who initially was supposed to become the head of the clan. So Wan was uncomfortable talking about the past. The children perceived it. From the moment his voice changed, filling with hatred, resentment, and rage, the children did not ask unnecessary questions because it did not matter. A couple of years later, the children acquired a younger brother who smelled strongly of medicinal herbs, and a few years later, the second youngest, who writhed in my arms and screamed like an angry cat. So Wan wanted Chu to take power after his death, and for his brothers and sister to become direct descendants of the Namgung clan. The leader was indifferent to the fate of the clan. The future heirs could destroy it or save it. He trusted them completely. Everything that happens to the clan after death will be the responsibility of the children. So Wan's eyes reflected a soul that had been burned to the ground, as if ready to part easily from life at any moment the next time. So Wan brought his son and named the baby Namgung Aran. Until that moment, Choi did not know. So Wan could smile so tenderly. Thus the baby became a son of the Namgung clan. So Wan hoped that the name Namgung clan would not become a cage for the children. And if that were the case, they would be willing to get rid of him and live not for the good of the clan, but for the good of themselves. So Wan hoped the elders had the strength to take care of the baby. Choi knew they would never become part of the Namgung clan, but So-wan called them brothers of her own daughter. The children were rather strange, and were not especially eager to become relatives, but they became brothers and sisters of Sogwan Namgung's son Haran. Thus little by little bonds began to develop among the children. Now they were willing to lend each other a shoulder and run to help at any moment. Thus Namgung Sogwan, who gave the children their name, left a small treasure for the Namgung family. The next night, Choi and Wunchun took care of the sleeping baby in their bedroom. A threatening shadow of a stranger loomed over the baby's cradle. It turned out to be Soren, who had abrasions on his face. Choi told him that his sister's nanny and the elders who were held in the underground prison had committed suicide. Soren discovered something else. The criminals did not commit suicide. They were murdered. When Soren took on the task of investigating the incident, he encountered a group of hitmen who were carrying out a witness cleanup. They were not many, but they were strong. Soren barely escaped with his life. Soren suspected that the mercenaries were using a martial arts style that emitted a red aura. It was a blood cult, the main instigator of the war that broke out 10 years ago. At that time, many righteous clans joined forces to destroy the leader of the blood cult. However, many clan chiefs and heirs fell on the battlefield, which caused the influence of the clans to weaken. Without conclusive evidence, rumors about the involvement of a blood cult could lead to unnecessary chaos, which would put the Namgung family in a difficult position. Due to the war with the blood cult, the Namgung family weakened more than others and in its current state was not prepared to withstand such an external threat. It was decided to keep a low profile for 10 years and during this time, restore the former greatness of the Namgung family. After Kang Woo gave a doll to the baby, all the other family members agreed to take turns caring for the little sister. Those were quiet and peaceful days, filled with a calm routine, but the girl was bored. However, the girl had her dear chatterbox So-so, always willing to share the latest gossip. But due to her serious mood, Choi Soso was afraid to say an unnecessary word. She could not afford to simply talk with the child while the director was putting so much effort into his work. Thus the girl learned to get up without help and entertained herself by reading the council reports. They contained a lot of interesting information, from coverage of politics in Anhui province to what was happening in the Murom Alliance. The girl found a note from the Red Jade Merchants Guild requesting payment for swords and agreeing to use a promissory note. Most of the older conspirators had already been defeated, but in the past, the Namgung clan could not pay for the weapons due to the consequences of corruption. The Red Jade Merchants Guild accepted promissory notes without problems, but when the Namgung family was in financial crisis, the blood cult took over debt collection. If the debt could not be paid immediately, the cult was willing to take one of the clan's businesses in exchange. The Red Jade Guild colluded with the Iron Blood Alliance, betraying the Namgung clan. The alliance immediately began to appropriate everything the Namgung family had at that time. Piece by piece, Jaeran remembered how the daughter of the leader of the Iron Blood Alliance, Nasoran, invited her to the Blue Cloud Pavilion, which had been taken from the Namgung family. Nasoran informed Jaeran that the pavilion with its luxurious view was delivered to the alliance by coincidence. Jaeran was outraged to see that the promissory note and the subsequent appropriation of others' property by the alliance were labeled a happy accident. Jaeran was embarrassed by the daughter of the alliance leader. On the part of the alliance, they were labeled a happy accident. Aran was embarrassed by the daughter of the alliance leader. At that moment, Jaeran still did not know that the alliance was connected to the blood cult, and under their instructions, everything left of the Namgung clan was being slowly destroyed now. Heron suspected that the Red Jade Merchant Guild might be involved in the betrayal. Choi was invited by Elder S.A., but the older brother couldn't leave his little sister alone and called her to accompany him. But Aran refused. She was more interested in continuing to read the newspapers. The problem was with the documents sent by the guild, so the little girl decided to prevent Choi from stamping them. The girl selflessly ruined the documents, feeling relieved until another document caught her attention. It was a document from the Merchants Guild that Namgung Wunchun had mentioned in Jaeran's past life. They wrote that they had heard about the search for a medicine supplier after the recent infamous embarrassing incident. Their intention was to help the family to further strengthen the ties between the Golden Libra and the Namgung clan amid the chaos reigning among the merchants' guilds. When each wanted to join the blood cult, only the Golden Libra remained loyal to the Namgung clan. It is one of the 3 largest trade guilds, so it has been able to stay true to the right path. The newspapers mentioned the poisoning of Anshan and seemed to affirm that they were aware of all the family's affairs and willing to form an alliance. Jaeran did not like this attitude. Choi appeared behind her and asked why she had made such a fuss. In Choi's eyes, his sister was a smart girl who clearly showed what she liked and what she didn't, and it was the first time she had done something like that. There must be a reason for this. My sister never did anything without a reason. Choi picked up his sister and asked her to tell him next time so she wouldn't get her hands dirty. Heron nodded in agreement, and Choi smiled. The girl promised to find another way to inform her brother about the danger. In the afternoon, Choi met with the council leader at the Park Shinhai estate and said he was ready to give a report. He was injured. During one of the battles, the enemy used a curious skill, and when Jinchul looked at it, he couldn't help but remember the old war times. Before becoming the council leader, he led the Celestial Lightning Squad and was involved in dark deeds as part of it. This led Choi to the conclusion that those hiding in the southern palace were the blood cult. They fought just as dirty, sending spies everywhere to fill clans and cults with their people. After this, they used the victims at will and destroyed them when they became useless. These were Shinchul's words. He was worried that they wouldn't be enough for the Murim alliance, but Choi decided to tell everything. The Namgung clan had been raising snakes under their protection for almost 30 years, and there was no guarantee that the Murim alliance would escape the same fate. Choi urged the leader to side with the Namgung clan. Jinchul complied with the request to spy because he understood the importance of what was happening but refused to side with the clan. The council must remain neutral. The children of the Namgung family were in danger, and knowing it and not intervening could make Jinchul responsible for the consequences. Choi remembered the pact made with him when he became the Namgung clan leader. According to the oath, the council is obliged to follow Namgung's orders unless they cause potential harm to the clan. The council would have to follow the oath regardless of the principle of neutrality. The document bore the signatures of all the heads of the great clans. If the council leader takes charge of this part of the work, Achan could focus on other things to develop a cover. This would allow Choi to spend more time with his little sister. Choi counted on the help of Chief Park. The leader reasoned that he should have refused so as not to be stuck on the estate for 4 years, fulfilling the orders of the Namgung leader. Beside him sat little Heran, who was already 5 years old. She complained about her family's overprotection, and the young man who had been sending her letters for several years, asking about her health and mood, was the young master of the Tang clan. Aran learned to write and decided to reply, but the letter disappeared along with the envelope. Then Kambu came and asked me to write a letter so he could help her find what had disappeared. Aran knew he was the one who had hidden the letter and was simply mocking her. Then the other brothers and sisters appeared, who also wanted personal letters from the girl. The girl rewrote the letter again and immediately ordered it to be sent to the Tang clan. Jinchul said the girl could have written to the youngest and everything would have been resolved smoothly, but Jaran knew that then her family would have felt offended. Jaren was worried that her family was overprotective of her. Despite their busy schedules, the older brother did not eat without the baby. Soren could not visit his sister because of work. The second brother was sick but still took on new challenges. The girl was worried. Because her brothers and sister could become seriously ill due to their work, Jinchul thought that Jaren was the youngest and a spoiled girl, but now he saw how she took care of her elders. Her family was so immersed in their work that the girl went every day to see the old man, so spoke about internal family matters. So the girl needed someone who had news about the outside world, and old Jinchul was perfect. Aran did not know which organization he was associated with, nor what he did, but he had many contacts, so he was very useful. It was worth pressing him a little, and Jinchul would immediately tell her everything. The girl was distracted from her thoughts by Kambu, was looking for the girl to show her something important. It was a tree. Kangu climbed to the top and called Garan to follow him. The baby turned to leave, but Kambu lifted her in his arms. Along with the baby, Kambu climbed a tree where he found a house hidden among the treetops. It offered a beautiful view of the lake, and the girl approached to observe better. Kambu carefully hugged the girl protectively. He did not test the strength of the small balcony and was worried that his little sister could get hurt. The baby began to laugh, and Kambu blushed, embarrassed by his concern. He sat next to his little sister and asked her how she felt. He knew that when Aran was sad, she sat next to the toy box and sorted them. The girl's birthday was approaching, and Kambu asked her with a smile to relax. After her birthday, the girl was expected to learn to handle a sword. The girl was worried about not being able to master the sword technique. Kambu could not understand his sister's worry since all the clan members knew how to handle weapons. If Aran had told something like that to her older brother, he would have assured her that her worries were unfounded and that she could do anything. The brother and sister said the same and encouraged the girl, but she needed Campbell's opinion, who lived life to the fullest and could give her an honest answer. Said that his sister should not worry. Martial arts will not make her someone else. She will still be herself. Kang Wu promised that he would always be there to protect his little sister even without martial arts. Hyo Ran would still be herself. She was never just a demon sword who wanted nothing more than to fight the girl. Was still worried about the elders' words about the problems the Red Jade Guild was bringing to the clan. She knew someone who could help her without facing the situation, but she was not sure of the method. Now she was experiencing life differently. Haran could not simply return to the documents now that she had a security guard who was getting on her nerves. She was so right that she did not let Jiran go anywhere. For fear that she might cause a real disaster, the young guard could not allow the girl to get hurt or be in danger. Since he became a guard, he spent all his free time with the baby and was able to learn what kind of person Namgung Aran was. The baby was the youngest member of the Namgung family, surrounded by care and prosperity. The young guard could not understand why. Haran acted as if there was nothing left in her soul. She was so selfless. Haran entered her older brother's room and did not find him in his place behind her. The vase suddenly began to shake. The vase could have been shaking due to a draft or because Brother Unchon had started taking poison again. The girl took the vase to take a look, but then Unchon entered the room. The girl shuddered and dropped the golden vase. Achon grabbed her by the shoulder and turned her towards him, saying that he hadn't taught Aran to take other people's things whenever she wanted. Chon's gaze scared Namgung. Her brother looked at her the same way as in her past life, with disgust in the darkness of her room. Namgung made sure her brother behaved that way because he was scared. Usually her brother never got angry and was affectionate. Normally she would have immediately run to Jaren's side to make sure she wasn't hurt. Namgung's brother's reaction made her lose her temper and ask why he was angry over something trivial. She should have apologized to her brother for her outburst, but the words got stuck in her throat. The guard, like the maid Soso, was worried about Namgung's condition. He advised Aran to talk to the second young master. The baby still wasn't ready to speak. She wasn't afraid of his anger and believed that John would never raise his voice to her, so the disappointment from her brother's shout hit Namgung so hard that she couldn't hold back her tears. She couldn't remember when she started depending on and trusting on Shan so much. The girl asked the guard if he would stay by her side if she failed to learn martial arts, failed in her studies, and became useless. Chusokan said that a person's dignity is not determined by their success. He advised Namgung to go to her loved ones and tell them everything. Namgung said she was hungry. Sekon said with a smile that he would convey the little one's wish. So when the guard left, Namgung thought she had started her life over from scratch during these 4 years. She thought this time everything would be different, but she couldn't forget the look that Unchun gave her. Namgung wondered how Unchun would react when on her 5th birthday, everyone would again discover that the girl was unable to learn martial arts. Would he get angry or start despising the baby? A deep fear tormented the girl. She trembled with anxiety but kept convincing herself that everything would be fine. After a while, this day finally arrived. Every year, these banquets were filled with guests and everyone stopped what they were doing to congratulate the little girl. Just as she had gotten used to the comfort, the day came that would end her peaceful life. Choi asked where the baby wanted to sit. Soren and Unchun sat next to each other and waited for her answer. The girl hid behind Choi and told him she should stay away from her brother Unchun. Choi solemnly thanked the guests for their presence at the celebration. On the occasion of his sister's birthday, everyone rushed to congratulate the little girl and tell her how much the young girl had grown. Aran still felt uncomfortable seeing her brother. The girl hadn't seen her sister in a long time either. She didn't answer her letters nor visit her. Even Namgung Kanggu was unusually quiet today. Aran couldn't understand why her younger brother was so tense. Meanwhile, the floor was given to the head of the Namgung clan council and the council delegation. They brought many gifts for the young girl and hoped she would like them. To the girl, the head was just a grandfather, not the council president. The girl realized that the heads the head complained about were his older brothers. The guests asked the girl to come forward. The moment Aran had most feared had arrived: recognition and doubt, admiration and joy. Aran was filled with a sea of emotions as they led her to the center of the hall to learn martial arts. It was necessary to control the internal energy. The master stood behind Haran and said he would transmit his momentum to her, and asked her to concentrate and remember the flow of energy passing through her internal points. Haran felt a warmth inside her, a familiar energy flowing through her. Suddenly the baby began to cough up blood. The master said that Aran could not master the martial arts. All her internal points and meridians were blocked, making it impossible to control the internal energy through them. Shouts were heard from all sides. Was it really possible? That a direct descendant of the Namgung family was unable to practice martial arts, Jaran couldn't understand why. She thought this time would be different. As in the past, these words were equivalent to a death sentence. The banquet hall meant for celebration and joy was filled with shouts of surprise and protest. Jaran, he couldn't see the expressions on his family's faces, but he remembered very well what would happen in the next minute. Amid loud screams, Haran ran out of the hall. The guests continued whispering. The elder couldn't believe that a direct descendant of the Namgung clan was not capable of learning martial arts. The council leader interrupted the elder's screams, or the elder lost his temper, since the council leader was responsible for teaching martial arts, and blamed the entire council. With a smile, Anchan asked if the elder really believed that the untalented members of the clan were no longer considered descendants of the Namgung clan. Soren said threateningly that the newly appointed elder was very worried about the baby. No, but that he should be worried about himself. Kangwoo asked what right the elder had to judge who was worthy of being part of the clan and who was not. He broke his staff and was outraged no one could trample his little sister in the mud during the festival. But Choi gently interrupted Kangwoo's outrage. The guests continued insisting that Haran Namgung would now lose the clan's respect. Choi understood that those around him thought his affection for his sister would weaken due to her inability to learn martial arts. For Choi it was amusing. He reached for his sword. The guests tensed as Choi calmly scolded them. For their obscene comments about his sister, they had 5 days to apologize to his sister while the baby cried in her room. His brothers and sister were willing to sacrifice their honor and destroy their relationship with the clan. Kampu was outraged. He couldn't understand why his brothers and sister didn't publicly defend their little sister. Soren accused Kampu of exactly the same inaction between Kampu and Soren. The usual dispute occurred. Soren asked Choi why he didn't intervene. Choi rubbed his neck embarrassed and admitted he was lost. Unchon admitted he was worried that his words would worsen the situation. Soren did not defend his sister as he first wanted to reprimand the guests. Soren spent entire days in the infirmary smelling of blood whose scent he tried to hide with perfume. Choi realized that his sister, despite her request, kept doing night patrols. The family decided first to calm their sister. Instead of finding out who was right, Kampu enthusiastically reminded him that today was his sister's birthday and suggested showering her with gifts and throwing a party that would make her forget all her worries. So entered the room and asked if the baby had returned. So assumed something bad had happened to the baby. Haran looked around her old room, empty and abandoned, just as it had been in her past life. This time all her relatives also turned their backs on the little one. Nothing changed. She was worried that So and Second would stop respecting her. Aran knew this would happen. She did her best to accept the outcome, but still felt hurt by her brothers and sisters' indifference. The girl was upset. The family said she was their favorite and that they would always be there for her. Namgung felt very hurt by Kangoo. He promised to always be by her side. Aran promised herself that she would not build castles in the air and made the same mistake again. The door creaked open. It was a wolf. It began circling the baby. The wolf sniffed the frightened Haran and then jumped on her and began gently rubbing its nose against her cheek. The wolf's fur was all dirty, and Aran thought it had been abandoned just like her. She hugged the wolf pup and said that a long time ago she fought with the blood cult and heard something. In the apostate cults, the Namgung clan was considered the easiest victim. This was confirmed when they managed to falsely accuse Namgung. Haran of poisoning the blood cult member said no one would defend Jaran. So the Iron Blood Alliance could crush the Namgung clan. When Aran heard these words, she felt an unbearable guilt. The broken expectations of others made her a pariah in the Namgung family. She became the weakest point of the clan, which destroyed it. Namgung asked the wolf to stay and live with her. She was sure she would be abandoned again and cause her family's death. Namgung waited until the end not to have to sell anything, so she kept things dear to her, full of memories, in a drawer. Haran wanted her family to always be united. The feeling of loneliness and betrayal made the baby cry even after her reincarnation. Her dream remained unfulfilled. Suddenly they called her, and Aran turned around with tears in her eyes. Soren ran into the room in tears. Soren felt guilty and worried because the baby had escaped. Due to her family's indifference, Soren admitted she avoided Haran because she was injured during the last raid, and she didn't want to worry the baby. Soren hugged Haran and called her most precious treasure. The girl burst into tears because Soren hadn't responded to her letters for a long time and kept her distance. Canva witnessed a touching scene. Immediately took the baby in her arms and worried that Soren had hurt her. The girl said through tears that her older sister was not to blame. Kambo hugged the baby to calm her. Charan couldn't resist and admitted she was worried because Kangoo hadn't even smiled at her that night. Kanbu was embarrassed because the girl almost fell from the tree due to his carelessness. Kangoo was worried that Jairan would get into trouble again if he was nearby. Uncho entered the bedroom, admitted he was out of control, and deeply regretted his outburst. He thought he should have calmly explained to the girl what was happening, instead of yelling at her over trivial things. Unchan promised never to scold the baby again. The girl hugged Unchan and forgave him. The family admitted that there was nothing wrong with Jairan's lack of talent in martial arts if she had the desire to learn. Choi would be willing to turn the world upside down to help the little girl. Choi encouraged Jairan not to be afraid of making mistakes and stumbling. He promised to always be by his little sister's side. The family bonds only grew stronger at this moment. Suddenly, the girl remembered her new friend. The wolf looked at the baby with disappointment and complained. Aran looked at her older brother with hope. She asked to take the wolf with her and give it shelter. Kangoo and Choi looked at Heron with confusion. Kampu moved the dog away from the baby, worried it was infested with fleas. It turned out the dog had a collar. It had the name Garain. Namgung looked at his brother in disbelief when he said the name. Choi admitted the dog was his birthday gift to his younger sister. The family members looked at their older brother with surprise. The dog turned out to be a mystical beast, the snow wolf of Yunnan. In the family's eyes, the dog didn't look like a mystical beast. It looked like an ordinary mixed breed dog. Now the worst days were behind. The girl didn't feel abandoned. Her life turned out completely different. The baby couldn't learn martial arts, so she became the Namgung clan's weak point. There were always those who wanted to attack the girl from behind. But in this case, she had a plan. She was ready to crush them first. The girl drank tea calmly, accompanied by her irreplaceable guardian. Suddenly a man burst into the room shouting. Jarain was not afraid, because her brother had built a window with a beautiful view in her room, so it was clear who to let in and who not. The guard politely asked the man to leave, but he replied that he had waited too long. He was Rio Gallo of the Gallo clan. He was in charge of the Celestial Star Trade Guild controlled by the Namgung clan. He came to apologize for the incident at the banquet. He was from the richest clan, and Namgung anticipated how much compensation he could get from him. His assistant brought a large chest. The chest contained many jewels and valuables. Haran said this would not be enough as an apology. Ryugayo did not expect such a response. He insulted Namgung in front of everyone. He hurt the girl, her brothers, and her sister with his words. The girl rejected the gift and kicked out the old man. The man from the Gallo clan began to boil with rage. Meanwhile, Kanbu entered the room. He had just washed the wolf. The wolf and Kanbu turned to the old man with indignation. The baby and the guard immediately told Kanbu that the representative of the Gallo clan had insulted the baby. Kanbu, who got angry easily, was outraged. He was willing to defend his little sister's honor under any circumstance. The status of his opponent didn't matter. The girl, with a malicious smile, said he would forgive the elder if he could defeat Kanva. The elder enthusiastically accepted but could not defeat the young master Kangu. He was very proud of himself and enjoyed the sight of the defeated elder. The girl eagerly prepared to tell the elder's debt. The condition was victory over Kambu, but the elder lost, which meant he had to pay money. The first price was 50,000 gold coins. The elder offered to make a list of all those who owed an apology to Yeren and in return asked for a reduction in the debt amount. The girl disagreed and requested a separate list. But the list was well made and the girl appreciated the elder's efforts. Namgung asked to name the simplest and narrow-minded among them. The elder continued listing, and Aran asked if it wouldn't be easier for him to pay with money. The girl offered to complete some of his tasks to reduce the debt amount. The elder asked if the girl's request was known by the young masters and the head of the Namgung clan. The girl hid her request from her elders but told the elder they knew everything. The elder agreed to arrange a meeting for the girl with one of the offenders. Yang Yon, the guild leader, warned that Yang Yon had a difficult character and might try to harm Heron. The girl was nervous before meeting Yang Yon, but everything went well. Ryogakyo was surprised because Yang Yong, who was known for his bad temper, calmly handled the meeting with the girl. Yang Yong admitted that just yesterday he believed a direct descendant of the Namgung family could not avoid having talent for martial arts. During the meeting, the girl told him she could not learn to fight, but that she valued her clan no less than her brothers and sisters and wished them prosperity. She knew countless ways to lead the Namgung family to success. In response, Yang Yong admitted he loved the Namgung clan with all his heart and was proud of it. Jaeran assured that her love for the clan was no weaker than Yang Yong's love. She asked Yang Yong to prove his love and loyalty to the Namgung clan by apologizing to her and taking responsibility for the hurtful words he said. Then the Namgung clan would shine brighter than all the stars in the sky. Geran's words gave hope to Yang Jong. Choosing Yang Jong as an ally was risky, but Jairan had her own reasons for it. In her past life, she was fierce and arrogant, but her loyalty to the clan was unquestionable. She loved the Namgung family so much that they nicknamed her the dog of the Namgung clan. If Yang Jo takes Ryujin's data and does everything necessary, Hirai will be able to get rid of the interference within the family. The girl decided it was time to move on to the next part of the plan. Uncle Ryujin entered the room and asked the girl again if she had received the family head's consent. Aran lied to him again. The guard could only sigh deeply and support the young woman's ideas. The girl took the matter seriously and was ready to start getting rid of the clan traitors. Therefore, she asked Arayu to bring the head of the Anjui branch, the second disciple of the cult of the supplicant hand, the elder Choig Jolge. The girl asked Shokyun and Ryu to leave her alone with the elder. the agreement with the Red Jade Guild failed. They began to thoroughly analyze the details of the documents related to the Golden Libra Guild and the Namgung clan. While spreading rumors, at first no one paid attention, but one day the cult of the supplicant hand sided with the Red Jade and gave weight to all the words and rumors. The girl remembered this when she saw the documents. On her sister's desk, the solution to all the problems Grandfather Beck complained about was in Jaran. A member of the cult of the supplicant hand, Choi Yulge asked if it was really the girl who had been investigating past matters and had dared to call him there. Aran wrote to him saying she knew what had happened 10 years ago on the full moon night and urged him to meet with her so everything would remain secret. The girl admitted it was her doing. At first he couldn't believe it because everything sounded absurd and stupid, but Yulge's reaction proved the story was true. The drink jar almost fell from the girl's hands. Then the adult Heron urged the gentleman to drink more carefully because the battle would continue at dawn. The lady was a disciple of the beggar's sect. So Gyolia, the student from Choi Yulge Heron's past, was one of the few people who brightened Namgung's loneliness. The lady challenged Aaron to a drinking race with her, and in exchange for winning to tell her true name. The lady promised that if she lost, she would tell the terrible secret of her master thanks to her resistance to alcohol. Jairan was able to drink more than Seo Gyulje that day, and learned the secret the master had kept for 10 years. The secret was simple. Choi Gyulje stole the cult leader's hiding place, opened it, and shamelessly ate it all at once. The secret did not belong to Choi Gyulje but to the cult leader, so it was kept in the strictest confidence. Aaron had another plan in case the master was not convinced by the revealed secret. Choi Yulge secretly used money begged on the streets, all to feed the orphans left after the war with the cult of blood. Yulge agreed. She already wanted to break ties with the Red Jade Guild. The decision to sever ties with the guild surprised Jaren. The people associated with the guild had started behaving strangely recently. They gathered small cults around them, forming an appearance of an alliance. The rumors spread by the Red Jade Guild were directly related to the Namgung clan, which has enormous influence in the province. They had no official name but formed around the Iron Blood cult, so they could be called the Iron Blood Alliance. Haran hoped the alliance would enter the game and was happy. She wanted to end matters within the clan and start carrying out a terrifying revenge on those who had offended her. Namgung gathered everyone who had behaved suspiciously in the main hall of the property under the pretext of giving them a last chance to apologize. Yang Jong began to act according to the plan and enraged the guests with his shouts about the injustice of the Namgung family's decision. Everyone began to support Yang Jong and condemn the actions of the clan and the baby. The plan began to be executed. Jairam called it a house tactic with Yang Yong, the Namgung family dog Choi, ordered the arrest of all those who supported Yang Yong and their transfer to cells. The guests began to shout about the injustice and try to prove how devotedly they served the Namgung clan. But the clan's decision was final. Choi said that doubting the abilities of his younger sister showed how weak was the strength of all those who said such terrible things. Choi knew that the seventh elder visited brothels and Captain Guyang acquired a rare sword on the black market. They used the influence and resources of the Namgung family for selfish purposes and gave themselves to corruption and debauchery. All this time they had been playing into the hands of the impious cults, the Dark Alliance. Thanks to them, the wealth and property of the Namgung clan that always adhered to the true path fell directly into the hands of the Dark Alliance. The mention of the Dark Alliance made Soren quite angry. Choi said the younger sister found a way to stop the rumors that the Red Jade Guild was spreading and solve the problem. The clan leader asked for an answer about who had truly served faithfully the Namgung family. All this time, the untalented sister or the traitors to the true path, the brother and sister, clearly planned this whole act in advance. Haran thought that now the traitors would feel what it was like for her to live in the past. Everyone around her, including her relatives, despised her, subjecting her to ridicule, scorn, and eternal doubt. She had to wander from house to house without finding refuge anywhere. It was a miserable and maddening life, but now everything was different today. Nothing will remain of the old foundations of the clan, and Heron will say goodbye to negative emotions, ridicule, harassment, and shame. Soren said it was time to start a new part of the evening. Soso and the young guard were moving the chess. Beautiful music was playing. It was a new birthday celebration for Jairan. Kambu appeared in front of her little sister and congratulated her. Aran's birthday had already passed, and she was surprised they celebrated it again. The siblings worked hard to organize new and true holidays, for little Kambu guided the girl toward the gifts. They kept them in a pavilion named Aran. Now the girl owned the entire building. The family built an entire building so that Aaron would feel comfortable. Choi waited with a smile for the girl's reaction. She was very happy. Haran immediately asked if she could bring the dog and the snake she had recently found there. She found it barely alive on the way home and treated it, giving it water and food. The conversation between Haran and Choi was interrupted by a Chon who asked if the black snake as thick as a pinky finger was the same one Namgung had picked up. It was. It was a gift from a Chon, a millenary venomous black viper, that had been prepared in advance. Achan decided that the dangerous and venomous snake would be an excellent guardian for his sister, and kept it in a jar for a long time to tame it. The viper had been living in the container that Heron wanted to examine all this time, and that was why Achan scolded her. Then Soren scolded the careless Achan for such a dangerous gift. The dog looked at Heron with pity. The girl could not share time with the silver wolf because she was busy. Many people were expelled from the mansion. There was a shortage of workers, so the girl had a lot of work to do. but for the sake of the dog, Jiran was willing to dedicate some time to play. However, the young guard forbade Giran from getting distracted from his work. Arani gave names to her animals. The older siblings gave the girl sacred animals. My sister brought strange eggs and Kampu caught a wild mountain ferret for the baby's sake. The pets were precious gifts for the family, so Aran put her heart and soul into giving them worthy names. The guard assumed Aran had finished her daily matters, so he went to report on the results of the task the girl had entrusted to him. The guard claimed he saw everything with his own eyes and asked if the girl really wanted to go there without telling anyone. The baby assured me everything would be fine. Kambu, who appeared nearby, asked why the girl had brought the guard with her. The young man was not pleased with the company of the third night. Kambu knew the city well, so he could guide the girl and her guard to the right place. Haran took Kangwa with her so her family wouldn't scold her, but with him, the likelihood of an unforeseen incident increased exponentially. Kangu and Garan waited patiently for the young guard. He went with them because he knew that two troublemakers couldn't be left alone without supervision. He had a bad feeling. Kambu showed the girl the market she had wanted to visit for a long time. The girl felt sick because she had to jump the fence. It was impossible to pass through the main entrance, otherwise spectators would immediately gather and ruin the plan by announcing to everyone the existence of the young Namgung. The girl wanted to walk quietly through the market. Shokan sighed. He had nothing to say in response. Kangwo and Geran sat on the ground and devoured delicious steamed buns. Aran called the orphans who were peeking around the corner. She offered them food, steamed buns in exchange for interesting stories. One of the orphans whispered that a noble lady wouldn't be interested in stories. The girl wanted to hear rumors, ghost stories, or answers to her questions. The girls asked what exactly the young lady wanted to know. The girl asked if they knew where the dark dwelling was. No matter how much the Iron Blood Alliance tried to take away some influence from the Namgung family, it was nothing more than a collection of small cults. However, the alliance suddenly and unexpectedly gained strength. Thanks to an event that was about to happen, the grandson of the emperor's main tutor, whom the ruler himself adored, was kidnapped. A mysterious group called the Dark Dwelling was behind the kidnapping. If Aaron remembered correctly, their base was in a quiet corner and they used children as messengers whose deaths would not raise suspicion. Those children who were now before Heron could lead them directly to the Dark Dwelling. The first thing Heron wanted was to rescue her grandson so that the laurels would pass to the Namgung family, and the alliance would receive a strong blow to its reputation. Aaron wanted to kill two birds with one stone. The children asked fearfully if the girl really wanted to go to the Dark Dwelling with his companions for these terrible people. Human life was equivalent to the life of an insect. Recently, they even started kidnapping children. Haran Kangwoo and Sekyung found the Dark Dwelling base following the children's warnings. Only motivated the little girl to stop their enemies. Kangwoo asked if the girl was seriously planning to enter the enemy's house. The girl was willing to do anything to stop the kidnapping of children. The heirs of the Namgung clan could not allow such a misfortune to happen in Anhui province. The children sent a message through snakes to the Namgung clan to warn the family. Jaron had thought about this from the beginning. Kambu admired his sister's ingenuity and promised to cover her back. Haran began to mock his brother. Meanwhile, at the monastery gates, the strangers were talking about the leaders who appeared unexpectedly. The emperor's tutor's grandson was kidnapped. Among the children they grabbed was that same boy. The man thought about selling the children as soon as possible. An accomplice interrupted his thoughts, asked to send a message to the Pure Moon cult leader. Their help might be needed to transport the children. It turns out the Pure Moon cult was mixed with the evil. The Clear Moon sect leader had always been close to the Iron Blood Alliance leader, but actually acted behind their backs. The leader became more brazen after receiving the Nazoran guard position. Aaron always found it strange that such a weak group as the Alliance managed to save the Imperial Master. It is likely that the Dark Dwelling was originally allied with the Iron Blood Alliance. They saved the child they themselves had kidnapped. There were 2 doors at the entrance. The girl suggested that she and Kimbu separate and check both doors. Kampu couldn't let his little sister go alone, but he agreed to the danger. Aran had to wait for the moment she could save her behind the door. Namgung chose there was a prison. She asked the captives if there was a child named Seomun Ono amongst them. The children did not know any child by that name. Haran introduced himself and said he had come to rescue the captive children. A small palm appeared among the children's hands. She asked how the girl knew their location. Aaron asked the child not to worry and promised to rescue him. The little girl obtained an innovative development from the Namgung family from one of the most talented masters of the clan, a master key. During the time when Garen was known as the sword demon, she often earned a living opening locks. There were no strong locks for her. She promised to open the lock quickly. The child watched enthusiastically. How Aaron used the master key. Finally, the lock gave way and clicked. Unknown voices began to be heard from the hallway. Arno immediately pulled Jairan toward his cell to hide her. The frightened children fell on top of each other. Haran's beautiful dream of saving Shoman Uno on a grand scale was frustrated. Haran clenched his fists. If only she knew martial arts. Then she could have torn the chamber to pieces and I would have beaten all the kidnappers, but the girl was too arrogant and lost her chance. She was a simple girl who had no talent for martial arts as an adult. Haran heard she was too impatient, and that she could learn if given more time. Haran couldn't believe she would have learned martial arts if she had waited a little longer. The master urged everyone to listen carefully. Haran's 9th meridian was blocked, so her body couldn't accumulate and release internal energy. Haran had never felt a single grain of energy in herself, much less the 9th meridian. but now the meridian was almost healed, usually the millinery fox techniques. Furious were used to treat these cases, and most people died due to the clash of yin and yang energies. Who treated Jaren set specific restrictions so that Namgung would not suffer damage in the process. This man transferred part of his own energy to Jaren to avoid the yin and yang conflict, and ensure slow healing. If Jaren tries to concentrate internal energy, she will rely on the yang element. So only after the yin is restored will the restriction be lifted, so Aran was left waiting helplessly again. The kidnappers were in front of the camera looking for a boy named Siomun Yunyo, but they didn't know what he looked like. Jaren stood up and said that she was Siomun Yunjung. The kidnappers were surprised. They couldn't believe that the Imperial Master's grandson was dressed as a girl. They said they came to save Siomun Yunyo. One of the kidnappers admitted that he expected better manners and pulled the baby towards him by the neck, first deciding to teach her some manners. The girl covered herself with her hands, expecting the blow. The man held his bleeding side. Soren hugged the baby and lowered her sword. No one had the right to touch the youngest daughter of the Namgung clan. A light scent of ink, the subtle aroma of lotus flowers, and a familiar way of embracing. It was definitely Soren's sister who came to the baby's aid in the Namgung clan. Only two stood out for their extraordinary martial skill: the elegant and formidable sword of Choi Namgung and the wild sword that cuts the sky of Gangu Namgung. But no one spoke of Soren Namgung's phoenix art, who often took care of the household. She urged the girl to stay there and promised to return soon. The girl grabbed her sister by the clothes and stopped her. Soren seriously planned to fight alone against the leader of the unorthodox sect. Even Choi and Kangwoo risked their lives to fight the leader. Soren could have been injured or even killed in the fight with him. Soren asked the girl not to get upset and not to think about the danger. She was only interested if the kidnapper had threatened the baby. Aran felt Soren smiled softly in response. She raised her sword and asked the kidnapper to drop his weapon so she could spare his life. He refused. A thundering energy shone. Aran remembered the conversations. They always called her boring. It was said that the precious lady of the Namgung clan had a golden neck. Since she couldn't bow for her mistakes, Aran found this strange, and all those who mocked Namgung in any way or tried to intimidate her were struck by lightning and were crippled for life. It was so inexplicable it seemed like divine punishment. Aran always believed that heaven was on her side. But the divine punishment was always her sister. She always took care of her younger sister and protected her from behind by eliminating her attackers. Aran's doubts dissipated, so now everything was clear to her. She was too young and proud to admit it. And now I finally saw my sister's true strength and character, her selfless love. She also won this battle. The girl hugged Soren gratefully. Now she understood how much Soren had done for her. Sester called Canva for a moment. Aran forgot she was no longer alone, that there were those willing to risk their lives for her. She wanted to change something in herself, become more compliant so her loved ones would stop suffering because of her. Choi hugged the baby and calmed her. However, the baby refused to go back home. She wanted to escort the Imperial Master's grandson and all the innocent children home, and accept those who had no family into the Namgung clan. As always, Aran worried first about others. The monastery filled with children's laughter. Kambu put the baby on her back and took her home. A child's hand modestly tugged at Jaren's clothes. The baby clarified the name of her savior. He asked why Aran had put herself in danger and pretended to be him. He thanked the girl and promised to definitely repay the debt. Harana felt with a smile Imperial Master's residence. They asked the boy why he left home wearing a woman's dress. The baby caused concern throughout the neighborhood. He was just pretending to be Shomen Yuno. The real one was now talking to him. The boy agreed to exchange letters with the youngest daughter of the Namgung clan, and the girl teased him. Yuno asked if Jaran was as beautiful as they said. The boy blushed and admitted it was true. Thanks to determination, time flew. The girl looked around confused. The forest where she was unfamiliar and seemed strange to her. The girl began to worry because she was starting to have visions. After all, they couldn't leave her alone. The animal ghost suddenly pressed against Jaren's leg and startled her. Images and visions began to appear. Transparent around us, the visions were too realistic to be a dream, and the girl thought she had fallen. Under the influence of a spell, the visions disturbed her. It was as if her whole life was passing before her eyes. She began to remember. The last thing she recalled was that Unjan had suddenly fallen. He was seriously ill, and without the elixir there was no hope to save him. Heron followed the memories of her past life and needed to find the legendary herb. She even argued with Kambu, who insisted on going with her. Aran entered the right hole and filled the container with the elixir. Was this a vision of the guardian of the herb in her past life? Heron had heard a lot about this place, but had never been there and didn't know what to expect. The baby decided to wait for her family. She was still powerless and couldn't manage on her own. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. It was Kangu's voice. Due to the fog, the girl slipped and fell. Aran fell from a great height but felt no pain. Her body grew back. There was a forest around the vision, but now it felt different, more real. It turns out it was all a dream, but reality hadn't changed at all. It made sense because her brothers were kind. The family became very close. The life in which Jaren was not abandoned. Due to her lack of fighting skills, it was only a dream, a fleeting dream of what Aaron most desired. The dream still lived in Jaren's heart. Suddenly, Aaron was called. A majestic man appeared behind the trees. He said the guild leader offered Aaron 2 options. He asked why Namgung decided to return, giving up his happy life. Jaran remembered he was supposed to meet there with an informant introduced by the guild leader. Jaran asked the man to tell him about the blood cult. He refused to tell Aaron anything until she answered his question. Aaron only wanted revenge and nothing else. The man asked if Aaron could achieve her goal alone. Aaron asked him Again, to give her the location of the blood clan, the man said with her current skills revenge was impossible for Aran and that she should accept help. Her clan fell, her family died defending Aran, no one could help her anymore. Aran felt alone and abandoned, now she only belonged to herself. The man said she was no longer alone. A soft warm light wrapped her and she opened her eyes and saw the worried faces of her family. How was Heron in the forest? And now she couldn't move, her hands were small again. Someone touched Heron's hand, it was Soren. She asked if the girl remembered her. Heron sat on the bed and looked around. She asked for a mirror to be brought to her. An adult girl looked at her from the reflection. She began to resemble the girl from her dream.